so that, you know, we are able to situate ourselves with the work that the consultant has done. And then we take the second presentation, which will be the second regulation, and then we hold a very short discussions as well. Once we finish those discussions, the next one will be, we go into technical sessions. This is where we will divide into groups, various groups, and then we'll do a deep dive digging into the regulations. That is, we look at the regulations, the various sections, and see the intention. What we want to do is to identify the gaps and see how we can improve on the provisions of the regulations and enrich the content. So that technical session will go into the various section of the regulations, and then we'll come up with recommendations that we will present, and then we go into plenary where we look at additional recommendations, and then that will be the end of the day. Thank you very much. That's how we intend to proceed. Now we will hand over the mic to, we'll give the consultants now to start the presentation. Okay.
Yes, over to you, the consultant, Mr. Conte. So, Pinta Conte.
Can I confirm that you can hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Wonderful. And can you also see the screen? Because I'm sharing my screen now. And there's a PowerPoint on the face of the screen. Can you see any screen at all?
Sure.
We can see the screen, but not the PowerPoint. Okay, we see the okay.
The PowerPoint is, I've shared it already now.
Yes, but it's not open. We only see the file.
It's not open. It's
Yeah. So you have
not
to,
a file. It's been
you have to
shipped
close it and
already.
you have to close it and open it. Close it and open
I'm
it.
trying to. We do it again. Okay.
Yeah.
We do that again. Absolutely. Okay, while we're doing that,
All right, it's open now.
I'd like to confirm if you have, okay, wonderful. If you have copies of the draft regulations in front of you, so there should be at least two documents. So a draft National Land Commission regulations and a draft Customary Land Rights regulations. Do you have those two in front of you?
Sure.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Wonderful. So, yes, so these are going to be the instrument that we would consider very closely today. And I'm so excited hearing you introduce yourselves to understand that you're coming from a wide array of institutions. So it means we will have very interesting discussions and inputs. Now, as the minister mentioned, the government last year passed these two laws, the National Land Commission Act and the Customary Land Rights Act. Now, usually, when laws are passed, they contain provisions that may be what I call self-executing, so provisions that are there that give rights and impose obligations. And that is all that you need. However, sometimes those laws would have provisions that require additional regulations to clarify them, to add more information, to spell out a process, etc., etc. And in this particular case, both the Customary Land Rights Act and the National Land Commission Act constitute laws that have both self-executing provisions, in other words, they contain rights and obligations, but there are provisions also in those laws that require regulations. And the reason we're gathered together now is because we want to look into some of the regulations that have been developed to help improve the implementation of these laws. Now, the National Land Commission Act essentially sets up and we're thankful to have the Commissioner General there, as the institution that would lead the process of land administration in the country. in a very decentralized manner. So you'd have a National Land Commission, but then right up to the village level, you would have institutions that are charged with land management. The law also allows for the establishment of a new type of land tenure system within the formal sector. The minister mentioned the issue of conveyances and how they are basically evidence of transactions. I mean, one thing is clear. In Sierra Leone today, under the current system, no one can confirm for sure that the person whose name is found on the conveyance is the actual owner of the conveyance because of the type of system that we have. The system of land administration and management that we have in the country does not allow us to make that definitive statement. Not even a lawyer could do that. And so any transaction you're undertaking, you're doing it at your own risk, because it is possible, and we've seen many situations of that, where multiple conveyances can exist for the same piece of land. And then what happens in that situation? You have to go to court to fight it out. Now, part of the reason why the Land Commission Act was passed was to deal with that situation once and for all. We do not want to have these uncertainties. And so for the very first time, we're going to introduce a title registration system that would provide the guarantee that is currently missing in the existing system. Now, however, the plan is not to have all of those things in the regulations, because part of what the Ministry of Land is going to do is to develop a new Title Registration Act. So that Title Registration Act will set out how we would basically retitle all of the land that exists across the whole country, including Freetown. What the processes would be, how do you prove ownership of your land, the kinds of systems we would develop to ensure that the land records are properly kept, etc. So we would have a specific law that would deal with title registration. So that would come in the coming months, hopefully. However, the Land Commission regulation that you have in front of you will address two things. Now, in this law, in the National Land Commission Act, because the law is proposing for the very first time in the history of Sierra Leone for land in the provinces to be documented, the law is proposing the existence of the inclusion into the landscape of two para-professions, para-surveyors and paralegals. So basically what is going to happen is that all of our lands in the provinces, which are governed by customary law and which are not documented, will, once we begin to implement these laws, will be documented. So families and communities will have survey plans that show the extent of their land holding. Okay? They would also have a title certificate that sets out the ownership rights of the family and some record of the existing members of the landowning family. So for the very first time, communities will have that. Families will have that. They will have documentary proof that this land that we say we have in Sheguema is ours, and it is in this document. Look at it, look at the plan, look at the title certificate, and they can then use that particular land for any transaction. So if they want to develop a bit of that land, they can, for example, go to the bank and secure a loan on the basis of that document. We have seen how most banks don't consider land of country as significant evidence of security for loans. So that would change once we have customary land being documented. So the regulations you have in front of you, the Land Commission regulations, are focusing on only two issues. Because as I mentioned earlier, the other issues within the law are going to be dealt with in other laws. So for example, the Title Registration Act, and there will also be a new Survey Act. Because we all know that the Survey Act that we have is more than 50 years, 60 years old, and it's not fit for the current situation. So we'll have new laws to augment these ones. But these regulations are looking at two main issues: the operational standards for para-surveyors and the operational standards for paralegals, because these two para-professionals will assist communities in the provinces go through the process of title registration. Okay, so here we go. So part 1 of the draft basically looks at definitions, okay? It looks at interpretation and definitions, like what is the meaning of a paralegal and what is the meaning of a parasurveyor. That is what part 1 looks at. Part 2 looks at the operational standards for parasurveyors. Now we have seen who parasurveyors are. Parasurveyors have been defined in the Act. Now these are not licensed surveyors or pupil surveyors, right? These are persons who will be trained to a level that is below a licensed surveyor and a pupil surveyor to function in the provinces to help communities map their land and submit documentation to the District Land Commission for registration of title. And so once they help communities depict the land, map the land, and submit that information to the District Land Commission, they would then get issued a title, a certificate of ownership or title for the family. Now, the reason why we have parasurveyors in the picture is because we will not be able to undertake this mass mapping and documentation of land in the country, especially in the provinces, using only licensed surveyors, because we have very few licensed surveyors. And we're talking about 8,000 to 10,000 villages as a conservative estimate that we would need to implement this act across, because this act applies across the whole country. And so if you want to ensure that people are able to map and document their land and get title, you need to have a lot more help than the current number of professionals that we have. So this particular regulations is setting out how these paraprofessionals will function in this new dispensation. So the first one we look at are the parasurveyors. Okay, so parasurveyors, in terms of the requirements for them to operate as parasurveyors, there are a few things that they need to have. First off, they should have completed secondary school, senior secondary school. So, so it's in this case it's the WASC. So they should have completed that. And in addition to having that senior secondary school qualification, they need to also have training in the following areas. And these areas were developed by the Ministry of Lands. The survey department, the director of surveys all had a hand in this. These are basic training. So fundamentals of surveying and instrumentation, introduction to cartography, land dispute and conflict management, land law, land policy and gender, and then introduction to ICT. So there has to be a basic training here. Now, the director of surveys and the Ministry of Lands generally will set out what this curriculum is in detail. But then if you want to qualify as a parasurveyor, in addition to having a minimum of a secondary school education, you should go through training in these different areas. And finally, you should also be able to speak the dominant language of the district where you will operate. As I mentioned, parasurveyors will be operating in the provinces, not across the country as a whole, not in Freetown. They will be trained to help communities because that is where the bulk of the work is going to take place. Because as you all know, the vast majority of our land in Sierra Leone is in the provinces. Over 98% of Sierra Leone's land mass is in the provinces. So only Freetown only constitutes a very small amount of that land mass. So we would need a lot of help. And parasurveyors are the one of the ways in which we could get help to actually document those lands. So this first part looks at the requirements of someone who should operate as a parasurveyor. Now we also continue. The regulations make provision for the mass recruitment of parasurveyors, because one of the things the Ministry of Lands wants to do is to embark on mass title registration to show how this thing works in practice. Okay, we don't want to have a law and just have it in the books. It wouldn't make sense. So the Ministry of Lands, through the Land Administration Project, is going to undertake some mass registration in various parts of the country. So the regulations will also cover that. And so we have here that even when they're doing that, when they're recruiting parasurveyors for mass registration, it's the government that is doing it, it's an agency, etc. they still have to meet the requirements. We're not compromising on the requirements. Okay? We're not compromising on the requirements at all. They still have to meet the requirements I just mentioned. And additionally, the regulation states that this training that we just talked about, may be conducted by the School of Survey. We all know certainly that that school does not exist right now, but there are plans to revive that at some point. So the School of Survey could undertake that training. An accredited educational institution, an NGO or MDA can also undertake that training based on the curriculum that has been developed by the Director of Surveys. The reason why the regulations include a number of institutions is because of the fact that one may not be ready, and so you don't want to limit the accessibility of education. So you want to make sure that a number of institutions, as long as they follow the curriculum, can provide the training for para-surveyors. Now, once the training has been obtained by the person who wants to be a para-surveyor, and they get a certificate, they would then need to apply for accreditation to the District Land Commission. One of the things that the Land Commission Act does is to make sure that every district has a land commission, which is a branch of the National Land Commission, to make sure that people don't have to leave their district to undertake land transactions. So anything that anyone can do in Freetown, they should be able to do in any of the districts. So the same makeup that we have within the National Land Commission in Freetown will be in every district, so that people in that district can undertake their land transaction and do everything that they want to do within the district. So the District Land Commission will be responsible for the accreditation of para-surveyors. So they will need to apply to the DLC, which is the District Land Commission, for accreditation. And then the commission at the district level should communicate a decision within 7 days. This should not be a long thing, right? They need to move very fast. Now they can say, yes, we have examined your application, we've seen your training, and we grant you accreditation. Either way, they can also say, no, we don't think you qualify. And if the person who's applying thinks that they qualify and that the DLC has made a mistake, they can appeal to the Commissioner General in Freetown for a different decision. And the Commissioner General can override, if he or she thinks fit, the decision of the District Land Commission. And in that case, the person will then be accredited to operate as a para-surveyor. Okay? Let me cross-check. Are you still hearing me?
Yes, we are with you.
Wonderful. Now, accreditation for para-surveyors will be for a period of 2 years, and it's subject to payment. So they have to pay a fee, not an exorbitant amount, but a small fee for accreditation, because this is also a means of raising funds by the commission through the districts. And additionally, we have a provision in there, and this is something you can discuss, where
Hello. Problem with internet. No, that internet.
Hello? The internet.
Well, I don't know if I don't know. Okay. Let me do